Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dress and Drinks. It's great to see you all and welcome. The Costume Society of America thanks you for joining today's Dress and Drinks webinar in our series Conversations on Dress. I'm Leon Wiebers, a professor at Loyola Marymount University. Our guest for today, Lisa Shockley, the Curator of Collections at Kansas City Museum. The museum holds a body of dress ranging from everyday wear to haute couture, photographs, and artifact accompaniments, and all in all encompassing over 20,000 garments. The collection highlights Kansas City as a fashion hub through time. In the 1870s, as local women ordered from Charles Worth in Paris, and, quote, 1 in 4 women in the country were wearing dresses from Kansas City, and in 2023, as anyone can learn about the city and dress at large through Shockley's Font of Knowledge. And a bit about Lisa herself. She's drawn to castoffs and sometimes overlooked. Shockley grew up wearing the clothes of grandmothers and great-grandmothers and continues to carry this sense of exploration of others and their garments through her 30-plus years in curation. Her experience is vast. She holds a BA in theater and an MA in history and is trained in conservation. She has made Tudor dresses and wedding gowns and holds a love for Native American Indian beadwork. Shockley's diverse curiosity, and the places this takes her are no doubt reflected in her work in Kansas City. Quote, as someone who trained as a social historian, telling the history of a place through the lives of ordinary people and their belongings continually excites her, and the museum's breadth and depth proves people anything but ordinary. To learn more about Lisa and the Kansas City Museum, welcome to today's webinar. Lisa, please join us. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I listened to the introduction. It's like, gosh, that's me.
So, Lisa, it's so great to see you. We're super excited to have you here. I love your glasses. Really great
Oh,
cat
thank
eye
you.
moment going on there. So, I will just be quiet for a brief moment and I will turn it over to you. Take it away.
Okay. And as Leon mentioned, our museum is a general history museum. It's not just specifically clothing and textiles. So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview about our museum in general, and then I will also bring in a few of the highlights or my favorite pieces from the collection. And I want to start off what you're looking at. That is the front of our building. That was taken not this year. We haven't had any snow this year in Kansas City, but that is the Kansas City Museum. And we opened in May of 1940. It was the merger of 5 small historical societies and museums about town that were in the basements of local schools and libraries. And
Wow.
these original collections, they reflect the 19th century trend of private collectors and what we call their cabinets of curiosities. As they traveled around the world, they picked up things that looked interesting to them. They thought if it was unusual to them, then it must be worth saving. And they saved things. We have things in the collection as diverse as archaeological materials they brought back from Egypt and the Middle East. We have nails and other pieces from historic properties. Including we have a stick in the collection, and it is just a stick that someone picked up off the grounds at Mount Vernon when they went to see George Washington's home, and they brought that back and put it in the museum collections. So we also have mummies, we have tourist souvenirs, taxidermy specimens, including an entire bison, and
Wow.
even a piece of hardtack. We have a piece of hardtack from the Spanish American War that someone very carefully saved, and they made a little glass box for it and a little plaque for the box that this was what Grandpa brought back from the war. And so we kind of like having that variety in the collection. This is Robert A. Long and his family. And our main building that you just saw, that is called Corinthian Hall. And that building was built as a home, as a house for the family that you see here. Mr. Long, his wife, and his youngest daughter, Loula. Now, oldest daughter Sally, at the left of the photo, she was married by the time the house was built. The house was built in 1910, and she never lived in the house, although 4 of her 5 children were born in that building.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I always tell people when they ask if our building is haunted or has anything, it's like nobody died in our building, but we had 4 people born in our building. And I met all 4 of those people over the years.
Oh, wow.
Um, it is one of only 3 structures still left in Kansas City built in the Beaux-Arts style, which is kind of a shame. Kansas City didn't save a lot of its old architecture back in the day. They've got groups and we work on it now, but until there was a period of time in the 1950s when they wanted to build everything new. And so we're lucky that we have one of the 3 structures left. After Mr. Long died in 1934 and his wife had died in 1928, in 1934 his 2 daughters were left with a 35,000 square foot building, a house in the middle of the Depression. And they both owned very large homes of their own. The oldest daughter lived near Washington, D.C., and they tried for a couple of years to find someone to buy the house, and there were no takers. So they donated the house to become the Kansas City Museum. When Mr. Long died in 1934, he was part of a group of men that were trying to merge all of those historical societies and make one museum. So his daughters made it happen. They gave that building, the merger happened, and we opened up our museum in 1940.
Oh,
And
wow. That happened really quickly.
yeah, one of um, one of our large collections that we have is our Native American Indian collection. And over the years, we have moved away from being a general history museum of everything. And we've made our focus specifically on the history of Kansas City and the surrounding region. We do have 2 large collections that we still continue that kind of go outside Kansas City because they're such strong collections. Our costume and textile collection is one, and our Native American Indian collection is another. And our Native American collection is approximately 2,000 pieces from
Oh,
all
wow.
over the United States, but we're particularly strong in Southern Plains material and Southwestern basketry and pottery, and that has to do with the interest of the people who started those original collections.
Mhm.
One of our buildings, we also take care of the exhibits at Union Station in Kansas City. And Union Station is the 2nd largest train station in the country. It's 825,000 square feet. Grand Central Station in New York is the only train station that's larger. And as a result, we also have a fairly large transportation collection. We even have an airplane. I
Wow.
try not to think about the airplane too much, but we do have an airplane. We have several automobiles. We have this motorcycle that you're looking at here. This has been written up in a number of scholarly journals dedicated to motorcycles and transportation. It is one of the oldest motorcycles documented as having been made in the United States, not just Kansas City, but it was made here in Kansas City. And this is our 1903 Cadillac, which is one of my favorite pieces in the collection. It is in front of a stained glass window that is in our building. That stained glass window is on the main landing inside the house. And we are the 2nd owners of this Cadillac. It was bought by the Cadillac dealership in Kansas City when it opened in 1903, and they kept it until the 1980s and when they donated it to the museum. There are only 3 of these left existing that we know of. One of them is in the lobby of the Cadillac building in Michigan, and the other one is in a private collection. So it's actually a pretty special piece, and we have people come who are interested in cars, particularly to look at this
Did you
vehicle.
have to do much restoration on it when you got it?
Actually, when it came to us, it was in fully operational order. They drove it in parades around town, and so
Excellent.
we obviously don't drive it or run it anymore. And the only issues that it's had over time is the little the little bulb on the horn, what I call the Uga horn, it's rubber and it's rotted.
Yep.
So that would need to be replaced. That's a natural thing that happens. You can't preserve that over time.
Yep.
So it does have, you know, it's wood versus metal. So we do have to be extra careful with the humidity on this piece. It truly is, when you look at it, it's a horseless carriage. I mean, it's everything about a carriage. It has the carriage suspensions instead of shock absorbers. Someone's just put a steering wheel and a little engine on it,
That's
but
amazing.
it's very close to being a carriage.
Oh, come on, tell
Next,
me you know you want to dress up and take that out for a spin.
I have sat in it, and not that we normally do that with artifacts, but we had to move the collection. And when we had to move the collection, because this piece is in such great shape, the easiest and safest way to move it was to push it on, because its wheels, everything is in really great shape. And so we needed to turn the wheels, so we didn't break anything. So I ended up putting on booties over my feet, putting on gloves, and sitting on it and turning the wheel as 6 guys pushed me down the hall of the building. So that's actually one of the most fun things I've ever done, and one of the very few times I've come close to using collections. So I've kind of driven it, I guess, in a way. But I would never, we wouldn't do that now. And we actually have that we have 3 cars in the collection, some fire trucks, about 2 dozen horse carriages, and we all have those stored now up on. They're up on jacks. Everything is up off the floor. There's no weight on the tires or anything anymore to preserve them.
Yeah.
Except for if we put something on exhibit, then we'll do it a little bit different for exhibit presentation. But that's how we store them now. This gentleman on the left in the monarch shirt is a man named Buck O'Neill. And Buck O'Neill is a Kansas City legend, and he was one of the most absolute sweetheart people I've ever met in my life. He was a legend in the Negro Leagues baseball. He did play in the Major Leagues baseball very briefly, but he was one of the founders of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum here in Kansas City. And he spent decades as a scout for various teams, but also as an ambassador for baseball in general. Major League Baseball actually inducted him in the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2022, just a year ago. And
Yeah.
it really should have happened before now. He really represented baseball. And the reason why I put his picture up here is we're not just a 3-dimensional collection, but we have an extensive historical archives as well. And that includes business records, personal letters, film, sound recording, books, magazines, oral histories, all reflecting the region's history. We have the earliest known film footage of Kansas City, which was made in 1896. So it's
Wow.
some of the earliest known film footage in general, and it's been used in some documentaries. We've had Ken Burns people here a number of times for various things in the film collection that we have. So I just kind of have to mention that we have the archives. As we collect, we also try to collect documentation to go along with the pieces that we have in the collection.
Yeah, that's very wise. And that documentation is something that every museum grapples with, from the earliest
Yeah.
objects that they have of like, where did this come from? It just arrived.
Yeah, this photo here is kind of a good example of that. This is Loula Long Combs, and Loula was one of Mr. Long's daughters. She was the little girl in the family photo a couple of slides ago. And this photo was taken in Corinthian Hall, which is our museum building. This was her wedding in 1917. She was married in the house itself, and this is the back door. And the wedding dress that she's wearing in this photo is also part of our collection. And so that's one of the things that makes our museum and archives stand out. We, as an organization, a decision was made sometime in the 1970s, 1980s, that they were not going to be a separate archives and a separate museum collection, but they try to integrate the two together. So it's particularly true in the clothing and textile collection. If someone offers us a wedding dress, the first thing I'll do is say, do you have a photo of you wearing it? We have wedding dresses in the collection where we have the photographs, the marriage license, invitations. We have at least 2 cake toppers
Wow.
from the weddings within the collections themselves. So there was one lady, 1967. She donated. We have her suit, or we have her wedding dress, the mother of the bride suit, the bridesmaids' dresses, the flower girls' dresses, the guest book, the invitation, the cake topper, the luggage that she took on her honeymoon. She saved everything, and she didn't let go of it all at once. She started donating the first pieces in 1985, and the suitcases she just donated to us about 8 years ago. She's been a long term, or as I call her, she's our serial donor. She's been really great. Her and her family, they saved, and they really documented their things as they saved them. So they've been a really good source for us. But it's easier to, since back to what I had mentioned in the write up, or you mentioned in the intro, is that as a social history museum, we want to try and present a better picture of what the everyday life is.
Hmm.
A lot of museums can be dedicated to a particular topic or a particular person. I've been in a number of collections where the focus is on strictly haute couture, or certainly higher end, and we try to collect things that reflect more the average. We have a lot of haute couture. We have a lot of really, that's the stuff that I just drool over. But we do try to collect a little bit of everything. One of the other large collections we have goes to Loula here. She was an equestrian. She raised hackney ponies and other kinds of horses, and she competed in carriage and horse shows. And
Oh, wow.
she had a 60-year career in the horse ring. We have about 1,500 of her prize ribbons and trophies, plaques, various awards that she was given. She was the first woman inducted into the Madison Square Garden Athletic Hall of Fame. So she actually was an important historical figure in the horse show world as well. So we have horse tack, we have about 2 dozen of her carriages, at least
Oh,
one of her
wow.
riding at least one of her riding outfits. We have she was known for her elaborate hats that she would wear in the show ring. She was known for wearing very, very large hats, and very, very spectacular ones with lots of feathers and lots of bright colors.
Oh my
And
God, I totally want to see that hat. Like, I want to
oh,
see,
there's
because
yeah.
that truth is stranger than fiction in these ways. When you're like, I mean, I'm a costume designer, and so suddenly, if there's ever a time when I need to put a person on a horse and have a big hat, and they're like, this would not have been worn. It's like, here's my picture.
Oh, yeah. And there in particular, there are 2 hats that you would love to see. There's one that's fuchsia colored from 1960, that she bought it to wear in a horse show that fall. She ended up never wearing it. Her husband passed away a couple of months before that show. And when she died in 1971, she left the museum in her will a lot of things related to her family, to Corinthian Hall, and the hat still had it's made by Shonda of New York, and it still has its original price tag on it. Think of, if you know who Minnie Pearl was, it's got the price tag
Totally.
and the sales receipt. So I know she bought it at Wolf Brothers department store here in Kansas City for $59.95 in 1960, and it was never worn. So it is in perfect condition, but we've got all those other little things to go along with it. I
That's
love
really
things like that.
delightful. That's really delightful. I'm curious, in the photograph, what is that behind them? Is that wallpaper? Is that a wall hanging? Do you know?
It's a large paisley shawl. And I believe it was actually a photo backdrop. That photo came from a very prominent local photography studio called Strauss and Payton. And we have about 200 images of Strauss Payton here at our museum. and most of their archives is actually at another museum here in Kansas City. And they were known particularly for society photography and wedding photography. And there are a number of their wedding photographs with that same shawl in the background. So it's a backdrop
Fascinating.
that they took around with them is the only thing I can imagine. But there are other photos almost identical with it in.
Awesome.
Okay, this one, other than the archives, our clothing and textile collection is the largest collection that we have. Consists of over 20,000 items. We have approximately 100,000 three-dimensional items in our collection, but
Wow.
20% of those are clothing and textiles. We also have about 425 pieces that specifically came from the historic garment district here in Kansas City.
Oh.
And that there was a museum dedicated to that. And when the two people who founded that museum retired in 2015, they donated that collection to us. So we have 425 items in their own little collection that specifically were designed and manufactured here in Kansas City, about a mile up the road from us, from where I'm sitting right now. Obviously, this piece isn't from Kansas City, but I had to pick it because, again, back to favorite children. You know, as curators, we're not supposed to have favorite children, and let's face it, we do. And this is one of mine. And even this photo doesn't really do it justice. That purple is such a beautiful, vibrant, rich, almost jewel toned purple still.
Oh.
And the dress is from 1877. Um, this dress was bought as part of the honeymoon shopping spree of a Kansas City woman. She also came back with 3 dresses from Charles Worth on that same trip that we have in the collections. And
Wow.
I chose this one because the color is so unusual. And I also the Petersham, the label in this dress just says L. Hentenauer, and forgive me, I don't know the French. I can't pronounce French. Paris, and then the street address. And the street address is within, from what I can tell, I believe it's within about 2 blocks of where Charles Worth had his display, his showroom. And I have never been able to find out anything about who this designer or dressmaker was. So I thought I would post it up here just in case somebody out there, if this looked familiar to them, if you know anything about this maker, I would love to know. This dress is made, it is the same quality of fabric, design, construction, everything as the Charles Worth dress from that time. This is really a contemporary of Worth, and this dress is amazing. And I know nothing about the maker, and I wish I did.
Thank you so much, Lisa. This is a great place for this, the CSA Brain Trust and all of our, followers and friends. So yeah, if anyone knows anything, please share with us. And at the end, we can put Lisa's email in the chat, or I'll give you mine and we can share it on with Lisa afterwards. So fantastic. This is a great mystery.
Yeah. So the other, in terms of our clothing and textile collection, Kansas City was not settled with the first, permanent houses until 1836. And then Kansas City was incorporated in 1850. Now, I mentioned we try to focus on the history of Kansas City, which means the vast majority of our collection is 1850 or newer. Clothing and textile collection is an exception. We do have pieces. Our oldest clothing pieces are from the 1790s,
Mm.
and at least one of those was remade. The fabric in that dress is from the 1760s, and it's a dress that was remade. We do know who made the dress, who wore the dress, who remade the dress in the 1790s. But those are our oldest. And our newest pieces in the collection are actually from 2020, when the George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests were happening. In 2020, there were a number of them here in Kansas City. And one of the organizers of those, he collected for us some of the t-shirts and sweatshirts that people made as part of that. So we have those in our collection. And so those are our newest pieces. So we go from fabric from the 1760s to a couple of t-shirts and sweatshirts from 2020. and we actively will be continuing as we go on. Uh, Kansas City was the home of TWA. It was started here, and it was here until it ceased to exist. Not really all that long ago. And we have a collection of every hostess uniform that was used by the airlines, except for the paper ones. They made four paper uniforms that they used briefly in 1968. And I'm showing this particular uniform because it was made by Bryony Marlin, which was here in the Kansas City Garment District. Some of their
Mm.
uniforms, they had one that was made by Mainbacher or Mainboucher, the various pronunciations. Ralph Lauren made their last uniforms, but this particular one was Kansas City. And this is a TWA poster, and again goes back to having archives collections to go along with the clothing and textile collection. And the four uniforms that you see in this photo, those are the paper uniforms that we do not have. And when we've done oral histories with some of the hostesses who were working at TWA at the time, they talked about how much they hated them, and at least two of them told me that they ceremoniously burned them when they no longer had to wear them. We only wore them for about 6 months, and more than one lady told me stories of men pulling them. They ripped
Oh,
easily. They were only worn in business class, and they were only worn in business class on 4 international flights. So there, it was a different time and a different attitude that the men on those flights had towards the hostesses.
yeah, yeah.
So, but I would love to find one of the paper uniforms. Anybody I talked to, whoever had one, oh, sorry, don't have it anymore. This is just an example of one of the pieces that was made here in the garment district. And you mentioned the 25% number, and we've been told at the height of the garment district, which would have been in the 1950s, particularly at the end of 1950s, maybe moving into the early 1960s, about 1 in every 4 women in the United States was wearing an item of clothing made in Kansas City. And the
Wow.
only garment district in the country that was larger, that produced more clothing, was in New York City. This photo, again, this is actually an advertising or promotional postcard, which is in our collection. Alice Nielsen was a popular star of early Broadway, and she became an opera singer in the early 20th century. And she sang with Enrico Caruso and some of the other more well-known. She's not very well known anymore, and she had a very brief career. She began singing opera in 1904, and she retired at the time of World War One. So she only performed in opera for about 10 years. But she was one of the very first women to sing Madame Butterfly. And Puccini, the composer, said until his death that she was his favorite Madame Butterfly. She also was one of the founders of the Boston Opera.
Oh, wow.
And she grew up in Kansas City, and she always remained close to Kansas City. She always had family here, and she was one of the early supporters of the museum in 1940 when the museum opened. She passed away in 1944, and she donated most of her theater costumes, many of her scripts, publicity photos, her address book. So it's another example. It's performance costumes, it's regular clothing, and then all of the wonderful archival pieces. This kimono is the one that she's wearing in the previous photo,
Oh, wow.
and it's it's in beautiful shape, and it has this wonderful embroidery. It has these very large roosters embroidered all over it. And I like the fact that we have the photo of her wearing it in that publicity photo, which was actually made for the Boston Opera Company.
Mhm.
This is actually a couple more of Alice Nielsen's costumes because I love those boots.
Those boots are amazing.
And they are incredible. They are thigh-high boots. And Alice Nielsen had the same shoe size I do. I have never put those on, but I can tell you I've been so tempted. They're just absolutely gorgeous. They're about a size, they're somewhere between a 6.5 and size 7. And Alice Nielsen was 5'2". When her secretary sent all of her costumes to the museum, she included a letter with Alice's detailed measurements. We know her hip, bust, waist, shoe size, height, weight, everything. The costume on the right-hand side, that
Very few
was,
actors do that these days, let me tell you.
yeah, oh, they're not going to tell you how much they weigh. But she wanted to make sure that we made the proper size mannequins for them. Was also the note. And these are all part of a costume for a musical called The Fortune Teller. Alice Nielsen, she was discovered for her first Broadway role by the wife of Victor Herbert, who was one of the first successful Broadway composers. And he ended up writing four shows specifically for her, including The Fortune Teller. But he's probably most today known. He wrote a musical called Babes in Toyland,
Yep.
which they made a movie with Mickey Rooney about,
Mhm,
starring Mickey Rooney. And since we're all costume and clothing pieces here, he also wrote a musical called The Merry Widow.
mhm.
And the costume style and the hats from that actually became so popular that now there is such a thing as a Merry Widow hat. That comes from Victor Herbert and from that show. This is Buddy Lee. Buddy Lee is a cute little doll. He's about 13 inches tall. He's a little bit taller than a Barbie doll would be. He was the advertising mascot for the H.D. Lee Company, the Lee Jean Company.
Yeah.
And they were one of the largest garment makers in Kansas City from about 1914 until 2019. In 2019, they were bought by a South Korean company and they moved their headquarters from Kansas City to North Carolina. When they moved to North Carolina, here in Kansas City, they kept their company archives and they had a little museum. And the company that bought them out wasn't as interested in maintaining that. So they contacted us and they donated about 60 items that were part of their corporate archives to our collection. And this little Buddy Lee guy was the one. The other large, really large clothing manufacturer in Kansas City was the Donnelly Garment Company, which also better known as Nellie Don. And Nellie Don, as a dress company, they were in existence from 1918 until about 1977.
Wow.
And they were the other large manufacturer here in Kansas City.
Those little overalls are
Oh,
adorable.
yes. Buddy Lee came in originally in 7 or 8 different clothing. You couldn't change. He wasn't a fashion doll like Barbie. He came and his clothes are sealed on him. You
Yeah.
can't take his clothes off without kind of destroying the clothes. And so you could buy them in what they Lee started off as a uniform company. And
Yep.
so you could buy them the Buddy Lee doll dressed as a fireman or a milkman or a policeman or a taxi driver, just the various uniforms that they made. There was a cowboy. This is the railroad engineer. And this is the one that they picked to give to us because we have the large train station that we're in that we take care of as well.
Now I kind of want to collect Buddy Lee dolls, I have to tell you.
Oh, I actually was the curator of the doll museum for a couple of years, and they had people who just collected nothing but Buddy Lee, and he's adorable. He
He
really
is
is a
adorable.
cute. He is a
He's a
cute
little,
doll.
yeah, he's super cute.
We have again a variety of things in our collection. We actively collect things that reflect everyday life. And about 2005, we did an exhibit called Timeless Toys. And in that exhibit, it's exactly as it sounds. We wanted to show what children played with over time, primarily the 20th century in Kansas City. And as we were looking through our collections, and I did some oral histories and talked with people about, toys that they remembered most from their childhood. Easy Bake Oven, Monopoly, Light Bright, Clue Games, Barbie, um, but we were looking for some modern things. Um, Video games. Someone had donated an Atari to us, and we were trying to think in 2005 what the modern equivalent was. And so this boy here, he's 12 in the picture, gave us his Game Boy Color and some of his Pokemon toys. And full disclaimer, this is my son. He's 30 now. So he is 30 now and he would die if he knew I was showing this photo. But I spoke yesterday to a group of sixth graders at a local school. and they are actually um, deciding they want to make a donation. Um, they're trying to decide what the current most popular toy is that they're going to get together as a class and donate to the museum. So
That's adorable.
yeah, the other reason that this particular young man wanted to donate that Game Boy Color was that he really wanted his mother to buy him a newer gaming system. And it was kind of like, well, if I give that to the museum, then can I get a new? It worked, but
It was a trade-off.
yeah, that's right. And we got what we needed here. This is a dress that belonged to Betty Ford, and I love it because I love the color. It is such
Mm,
a classic fashion color for 1974.
that's a
We do
gorgeous
have
green.
we have a small collection of first ladies dresses here. We have at least 5 presidential first ladies. We have numerous Missouri and Kansas first ladies, as well as local city first ladies dresses in the collection. And a few years ago, I say about 15 years ago, I worked with a first ladies exhibit from the Smithsonian. And when we brought that exhibit to Kansas City, we were able to augment that with about 12 dresses from our own collection.
Wow.
And we ended up with this dress. Again, it's not necessarily connected to Kansas City history. This is a dress. She wore this dress when she gave her first press conference, and which was the day after President Nixon resigned. Betty Ford went and toured the White House with members of the press corps, and this was the dress that she wore. In 1976, the Republican National Convention was held here in Kansas City, and Betty Ford and her daughter Susan came to visit the museum and saw they were talking and realized that we had a very large clothing collection, and Susan Ford came back with this dress and
Wow.
donated it to us. And but I love this. It's silk. It's not polyester. We have some similar dresses in the collection from that time that are all polyester, but this is
Hmm.
actually a beautiful silk. Again, just because this is a fun, vibrant dress. This is Norman Norell, and for some reason, Kansas City women loved Norman Norell. Whether it's Norell, Norman Norell, Trina Norell, all of the various incarnations of his companies over the years. We have, he's probably the most represented designer in our collection. Um,
Wow.
Not sure why, but we have probably more in terms of true designers. We probably have more of his pieces than anybody else. But this is the most standout one.
I'm gonna say
That
I have
that
never heard of Norman Norell. I'm revealing some ignorance here. What? Tell me more.
Um, well, he was fairly significant, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head because I don't want to misspeak out on this. There are people who will correct me, but he started off working for oh, I want to say it was Hattie Carnegie. I'm not certain, and I don't want to speak off key because there's going to be people here who know a lot more about him than I do. But he was active from the 1950s really until he passed away in the early 1970s.
Hmm.
And his his designs that we have in our collection are more what I would call matronly dresses, dresses that were worn by the society women. They were all of the women, all of the Norell dresses that we have in our collection were donated by women who bought them when they were in their 50s and when they were in their 50s and 60s in age.
Mm-hmm. So
So
is this dress is that like a split skirt on the bottom? Is that like a jumpsuit or is that a skirt on the bottom?
it is a skirt. It is just has very, very deep pleats in it.
Yeah.
And
I
that
couldn't quite tell the way
design,
the one that fold is happening.
yeah, and it's a very, very heavy, heavy silk taffeta. It's a beautiful fabric. I mean, it's just gorgeous fabric. And that Maltese cross on it, that necklace, it's actually all applied. It's all sewn to the dress, and they are huge rhinestones.
Mm,
Some of the rhinestones are the size of my thumb. It
wow.
is it is a dress that the woman who wore this, when she walked in the room, everybody noticed. I mean, between the color and the sparkle. And she also was the wearer of this dress was 6 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
We also in the collection in the archives we have a photo of her wearing the dress.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, that's
Um,
gorgeous.
we have a lot of paisley shawls in the collection, and including a few pieces of clothing made from them. And I love this. This is one of my
Oh,
favorites. It's a very classic dress. If knowing clothing and costume history, this is the Halston 704. We dated 72 to 74. That's the years that he made this particular dress in that color. And this is the ultra suede. And I was very, very happy when someone offered to donate this to us. It's just a real
great
classic piece.
dress. Really great dress.
This one, I just included because I love the color, Zandra Rhodes. And the other wonderful thing about this dress, the donor, I knew the donor. She bought this and wore this to an event. She was 87 years old. And she was, Zandra Rhodes, she was very contemporary. Irene, the woman who owned this dress, she always kept her sense of style and bold color. We also have in the collection a dress that she wore to JFK's inauguration in 1961, and again a bright yellow, very bold color, and so it's really great. The woman who owned this, we have dresses of hers over a 40-year period,
Oh,
and they
wow,
all
that's
have very
amazing.
very strong sense of style and very bold colors. And Irene was I think about 5'11". She was a very tall woman as well. Just because it's Christian Dior and it's 1948, we do know the woman who owned this dress as well.
It's a very hippie dress.
Yes, and it actually curves forward slightly. It's almost like a scoop dress. You
Hmm.
can't really tell that from this photo very well. When I found this in collection storage, because of the way the inside is, it's a little rough in the seams. I contacted Dior because I was wondering if it really was a Dior, or if the owner had maybe tried to take it in herself, maybe for somebody else to wear. And when I contacted Dior, they verified it. So they said, nope, this is exactly how it was, and that it would have been curved forward a little bit on that. So she would have walked in the room kind of shooing people in front of her.
Oh, wow.
This was also owned by the same lady, and it's one of my favorites. It's just the nice color. It's a beautiful dark blue, and it's got that nice pink. It's got
Hmm.
that nice pink too. It's just well made. We do have a lot of children's clothing. We don't have a lot from the 19th century, but this is one of our special pieces. It's actually in very, very great shape towards its age, and we don't have a lot of boys' clothing from that time period, so I just put it in there. This is just another classic example of a style of a time. Early
Yeah.
1970s. It is a mini skirt. It is a suit. It also came with a pair of slacks. It's that beautiful bright wool plaid. And it kind of represents, what Bobby Brooks started off as. A very quality, stylish company. Now I think they're sold at Dollar General. So the company's changed a bit over the years,
Yeah.
but
The sleeves on that blouse are amazing.
they are incredibly full. Um, Actually, I don't know if I should address Meg later or whatever. The ultra suede, actually, it looks absolutely like it did the day it was made, as far as I can tell. I
Oh,
don't know
wow.
what it's going to look like in another 30 years or 40 years, but right now, it actually looks really great.
Oh,
Um, and I think as long as you don't get it wet, from what I understand, ultra suede has a lot of issues if it gets wet. I just included these because they're hand painted and I think they're really pretty.
they're beautiful. They're really
And
beautiful.
these were worn by a woman at her wedding. She got married in Topeka, Kansas, and we do have her wedding dress in the collection. Another one of our
Huh.
performance costumes. We do have a lot of costumes in the collection, and we are also part of GLAMA, which is the Gay and Lesbian Archives of Mid America. And
Oh,
it's a partnership between us and the special collections at the University of Missouri in Kansas City. And within that, we have a large number of drag performance costumes. And this one I just picked because I love the colors and I love the feathers on it. And this was worn by a local performer named Melinda Ryder, the year she was the MC for the Pride Parade. And I think this was either 2000 or 2001. And I'd have to ask Melinda which year in particular. And this is Kit and Kay. Kit and Kay were Orlean and Irene Krause, and they were a set of identical twins. They performed with um, a local theater they called the Brush Creek Follies. And the Brush Creek Follies were Kansas City's equivalent of the Grand Ole Opry.
Hmm.
A lot of towns, Chicago, Springfield, Missouri, um, all over the country had their radio shows with their country and western singers. The outfit on the left is part of our collections. That is Orlean, and I cannot remember if she was Kid or if she was Kay, honestly. And one of the reasons why I also included this photo and their story was featured in the Costume Society of America's calendar in, I think it was 2005. I couldn't find my copy of the calendar in the files. I don't know where it is, but that's something. So it's a little bit of Costume Society of America's history as well. Kit and Kay are they're your calendar girls.
Fantastic. Oh, and speaking of Costume Society and history, I am aware that you were an angel at one point as well.
Yeah,
Uh, so,
when the society was here in Kansas City. Oh goodness, I can't remember what year that was. But
um,
whatever year in Kansas City, yeah.
yeah.
So,
And were you at the Kansas City Museum then, or at a different location?
I was with the Kansas City Museum then. I started off here in 1993, and I was here for a little bit over 21 years. And the museum closed for renovations. Did a complete renovation top to bottom of the building.
Oh,
Corinthian
wow.
Hall, the home in the first slide, was built in 1910. And in 2014, we were still using the original boiler system for heat. There was no air conditioning. A lot of the plumbing was original. Some of the wiring was original. So in 2014, they made the decision to close, do a full renovation. So I worked at the National Museum of Toy and Miniatures. I worked at the Doll Museum. I also worked doing records management for the federal government. Um, so I had a variety of things. And then when the museum was ready to reopen in 2021, they contacted me and made me an offer to come back into my job again. And so I love this collection. I love this museum. So
So
I
how long was the
I liked what I
renovation?
was doing before, but I really like this. I really love this collection.
So how long did the renovation take? 7 years?
Um, it took um, yeah, there were some setbacks within that, not
Mm,
just COVID, but anytime you start on a project, that our main building is 35,000 square feet.
yeah,
So anytime you start working, and if anybody's done a home remodel project, you start on one thing, or you rip off one wall, or take out one pipe and you find two others that you didn't realize needed to be worked.
yeah.
But what ended up holding things up at the end was with COVID. I don't know how many times, because I stayed in really close contact with the people who were working on the project, and we would get together for drinks, and they say, oh yeah, this piece they just told us, yeah, they sent it, but it's sitting on a ship in the Pacific Ocean somewhere. um, so
Yep.
yeah, and we are temporarily closed again. We're doing some tweaking on the HVAC system.
Mm,
One of the things that we were able to do in the renovation was add a humidification system, humidity
great.
control. And in the winter in Kansas City, when the actual humidity can get to 12%, I've
Yikes.
measured it at 12%, and that's just way too dry. And because we had to add that, we had to take a couple of ceilings out in a couple of rooms to get to where the mechanicals had been installed, and it's just easier to do that without people in the building.
Yeah,
For all safety reasons, insurance. It was just easier.
it's just
So
easier.
we will
Yeah.
be, yeah, we'll be reopening next month.
Awesome. Lisa, this has been fantastic. What a great broad overview of your collection and the really interesting things that you have. I totally want to come and look at those theater costumes and talk with you about them.
Oh, come.
I mean, amongst any number of other things, but so that is wonderful. So I have a few questions. One, since one of your collections is the large Native American collection, have you been working with, in today's world, in the new modern society we live in, are you working with any of the tribes around and considering repatriation or curation, or how are you navigating that landscape?
It's interesting because literally this week, in the last week, I have been working with a village in Alaska on a repatriation issue that we're actually trying to repatriate something this summer. Um, and in the Aleutian Islands, it's a little tricky because the United States government did nuclear testing there in the 1950s.
Yeah,
And so some of the um, some of the things that we have here came from what's now became a nuclear test site.
right.
So there are all kinds of hoops that we have to jump through. The Smithsonian we're actually partnering with the Smithsonian. Somebody there is helping us with this. We are fortunate in that we have very, out of the 2,000 pieces, we have, I think, 27 that could possibly be considered for repatriation. So, actually, I see Meg. No, fortunately, what we have came off the island before they did the nuclear testing. Um, so no, the only things we might check on a Geiger counter would be if we had some uranium glass or something in the deck glass, the decorative glass collection. But so many people have that in their homes.
Yeah.
But oh, yeah,
And
we're
Jennifer asked a question. Did you take the working soda fountain out of the basement, or am I thinking of a different Kansas City museum?
that is us. And
You have a
yes
working
and no,
soda
it came
fountain?
out, but it's going to reopen. And if you're asking about the soda fountain, you may have seen it before. So what we did was we took the soda fountain part and we moved it. It's in the same room, but it's in a different orientation. But yeah, we're going to be doing sodas and root beer floats and yes. Um,
Awesome.
so
And
I
Jean
saw
Parsons,
someone.
hey Jean, it's good to see you. Jean Parsons asked, are you working with the Historic Garment District Museum collection downtown?
Yes, actually, that is now part of our museum. Anne Brownfield and Harvey Freed, the two people who started that museum, they when they retired in 2015, they donated their collection and their exhibits to us. So we operate that museum and maintain that collection now. That's part of the Kansas City Museum now.
One other thing that I want to ask you about is so in Los Angeles, where I am, we have the country's largest collection of LGBTQ archives, the One archives that are a part of USC.
Yeah.
And they have some drag costumes and other things as well. And I've begun a conversation with one of the curators about how we could possibly help them conserve them or work with them because they need better storage for that. So, do you work with them at all in the collection that you have? Have you? Um,
I haven't had any contact with them yet.
oh, if
Um,
you would love to be introduced, I'm happy to do so because they
yeah,
have
let's do that. Yes.
because
Any
they have a phenomenal collection of posters and ephemera and books and literature and you name it.
and because we partner with another institution here in town, and so we kind of divvied up. It kind of started. There's a gentleman in Kansas City named Stuart Hines, and I kind of call him the godfather of the collection. He is the direct, and I may get his title wrong, but he is the director of the special collections for the university.
Mhm.
And their special collections is strictly archives. They're not set up to take three-dimensional collections. And he and two other people in Kansas City, they wanted to start preserving the LGBTQ history of Kansas City. So they partnered with us because we had the ability to do the three-dimensional, to do the costumes.
Right.
And Stewart has worked a lot more with some of the other organizations, and it's very possible that he has worked with the group in LA. I haven't been involved in those conversations yet, but if they want to have you know, we could take that off. I don't know how many other people are interested in that,
Yeah,
but
no, actually, I would love to
I'm more
talk with
than
you.
happy to talk, just to find out what they have. I love shiny, sparkly rhinestones, sequins, feathers, and Melinda Ryder. If I have worked with her, if I have, anytime you touch one of her costumes, you end up with something royal blue sequin and glitter on you. You
Glitter
get you
is
get
glitter is
glitter.
the herpes of the craft world.
That's right. And the drag world and the museum clothing. But
Exactly.
I love the variety.
This has been
It is
really
lovely.
lovely, and it's been great to see your collection and to talk with you. And the next time I'm in Kansas City, I'll be looking you up and wanting to come and take a tour.
Yeah. And if you know, if anybody has any, wants to know anything more about things in our collection, they're more than welcome. Send me an email, give me a phone call. I'll talk all day.
I just want to say thank you to everyone and to Lisa Shockley for her time today and for all of you for attending. Please follow the Costume Society of America on Facebook and Instagram to make sure you hear about our upcoming episodes of Conversations on Dress. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's content, we implore you to make a small or large donation to keep this content free for all. It's been really lovely having you, Lisa, and thank you for your efforts and all of this super fun conversation today.